Hi, Mike Jacobi here, inviting you to join us again for Jazz Tonight as we kick off the 2015 season. This year, the Summer of Sinatra, dedicated to Old Blue Eyes, celebrating his 100th birthday. Each week, we'll be bringing you a new artist that's appearing in town, look behind the scenes and find out what they've got going on in the recording studio and find out what else is going on live in their lives. Jazz Tonight, right here on KCAT.
Captain's Log, Day of Discovery. Today, our junior crew members declared their independence. While the young cadets explored uncharted territory, the Admiral and I discovered the Fountain of Youth. Later, we were treated to a royal banquet. And after a brief skirmish with pirates, we celebrated with cannon fire.
Disney Cruise Line. When it comes to pleasing everyone, the difference is Disney.
Hello, and welcome to Jazz Tonight. I'm Michael Jacobi, executive producer of Jazz on the Plaz, and host of Raising the Standards on KSCO Radio in Santa Cruz. Delighted to have you with us as, we're getting down to the short time as we're beginning to wrap up Jazz on the Plaz 2015, our homage to Mr. Sinatra on the occasion of his 100th birth anniversary. Now, normally, we interview whichever artist is in town playing on a given evening. And by the time you see this, the artist will be long gone. But our annual visit from the Monterey Jazz Festival County All-Star High School Band and Choral Group is in town, or are in town as the case may be. However, they can't get in, and I went to my A-list to find someone, and I'm delighted to welcome a dear old friend, Carroll Coates. Hello, Carroll.
How are you, lad?
I am well.
You look it.
Well. You got that accent thing going on.
Right.
I like it. For folks that don't know Carroll, you certainly know his music. He is a, can I call you an icon? Is that all right?
Not Carl icon.
No.
Yeah.
And I guess you may, an icon in the music business, among other tunes. And we'll be talking about Sinatra specifically.
I'm no Sammy Kahn, let's face it.
But Three Coins in the Fountain. And many, many more. And Sammy, but Sammy's passed on, although with a much larger, with a much larger estate than we'll ever have. No One Ever Tells You for Frank. London by Night for Sinatra. You'll See, which
15 different recordings.
Is there from Tony Bennett? Carmen did it?
Tony Bennett, no, not.
I know Mary Stallings did it.
Yeah, Diane Shore,
Yeah.
Nancy Wilson.
Okay.
I'm having a senior moment.
That's true. I
At
call
my age of 23, it's kind of amazing.
That is amazing, but you've held up well. The hat's older than you are. Sunday in New York.
Right.
Music
by Peter Nero.
Lyrics
by Carroll Coates.
And Voice and Hit, I guess, by Mel Torme.
Voice and Hips?
Voice and the Hit version by Mel Torme.
Yeah, it sort of was.
I guess he had the biggest version.
Right. He had a very big version.
Did Rankin did it as well, right?
Hmm?
Did Kenny Rankin do it as well?
No.
Whose notes have I got?
God knows, Michael. Probably your own.
And Music Is My Life, is that a tune you wrote for Diane Shore?
Sure,
Diane
yes.
Shore. Yeah, we've, as you know her and people that know her well, her nickname is Deedles.
Deedles.
She has been here. Look, our studio audience is arriving. This is great.
Oh.
So she has been here at Jazz on the Plaza a few years ago.
Great.
Marvelous, marvelous entertainer. Talk about it, and it's kind of a, I don't know, it's a thing of the past, being primarily writing for one individual. But you've done a lot specifically for her.
Actually, I have. Just so happens that she recorded 4 or 5 of my tunes. But I don't ever write for a specific person unless, rarely, it was which doesn't happen often, it was a commission.
Okay.
Or for a movie. In the past, if I was given an assignment to write a lyric for a picture. But not for artists, I will.
But like a director, though, I mean, you say to yourself when you write a tune, you say, who would be good, who this would be good for?
Yeah, there's a certain, I think you would call that casting song.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I will, maybe when I finished it, if I ever finish it, there are a lot of unfinished things in the trunk, as with most writers, but I usually I have one person in mind usually for most of the songs I write, who is no longer with us, which is Mr. Sinatra.
And whom will...
Because, I mean, how can a writer do any better
Yeah,
than that?
or, yeah, we'll speak specifically to that. And what you
We
just
better.
said, what you just said about things in a trunk is exactly why I don't bring notes to these interviews, because it reminds me of the marvelous story that Barry Manilow was with Mrs. Mercer and going through Johnny's stuff, and they found When October Goes. Right. Now, are there hidden gems in your trunk that perhaps you're not even aware of?
I think all the best songs that I've written are in my trunk.
Yeah.
It's an extremely valuable trunk.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I have a lot of... See, I write words and music, and originally I was in a small demand as a lyric writer.
Okay.
And actually it turned out that the better songs, as far as I'm concerned, I wrote words and music.
And you
know,
prefer that, I would think.
Yeah, because I'm a control freak,
Yeah,
and
right.
I'm more control over, no. But yeah, I do. I think one of my career, I don't know if you want to use the word mistake, but something I would probably do differently now, if I could turn the clock back. I think I would have tended to be more open to cooperation.
Yeah.
But I sort of, you know, I was like this with my songs, and then I'd let them out into the world, and hopefully singers and people would bring them up in an appropriate way, but very often they didn't.
Well, talking about, frankly, I think a remarkable breed of entertainer and songwriter are the folks such as yourself, Cole Porter, Frank Lesser,
That's
who did
pretty
double.
heavy company.
Yeah, that
to put
is
me
heavy
in.
company
But you're
who've done double
You're
duty.
very generous.
Yeah. Did Hoagie ever write lyrics?
No,
No,
I don't think
okay,
so.
okay.
Maybe he did, you know,
But probably the music
I'm gonna have
outshined
something in a
them.
cabin in
Yeah.
Iowa or something.
Well, you know the story about, it's oddly enough, they were again sitting in the cabin with Frank Lesser and their wives,
Oh.
and one of the wives said, "Why don't you two, instead of just sitting around, write a song?"
Wow.
And Lesser said, "Well, we're out of cigarettes," which is how
It's Two Sleepy
Two
People.
Sleepy People started,
Yeah.
which is
Good,
a
you
lovely
have-
thing.
You have a good knowledge of all this stuff.
Well, it's because I talk flat, but I do know my music.
Right.
You and I met when I was at KRML, probably 20 years ago.
Is it that?
It may well have been. Well, I think, when did Sinatra die? 98.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Sammy
we met.
Kahn used to say, and that'll tell you how long ago that was.
Well, Frank died in 98, and you and I did a special show on that. But I think you and I had known each other for a couple of years prior to that. Just outside of London, you grew up?
All over England.
All over England.
In the war.
And as we talked about with your wife, who oddly enough is named Carroll as well, but
Right.
not as presumptuous with all the extra consonants. But we talked about the fact that wherever you went, Hitler seemed to follow.
Yes.
You were the,
Yeah, I did.
They
Well,
bombed everywhere you were.
The only peace I had was at boarding school on the Welsh border. And that was, you know, very nice. But when I went back to the cities, and it so happened my mother moved a lot, not because of bill collectors, but I think for other reasons, that she just was a moving lady in many aspects. And we had to move with about a kennel of Welsh corgis, about 8 or 9 corgis, and who were in the various cellars. And then
You had corgis before the Queen, right? Or was it about even?
No, it was about equal, because actually a friend of my mother's, Thelma Gray, was the one that sold
Oh, really?
the royal family the first corgi. It was
Okay.
called Dookie.
Okay.
And but I grew up with corgis, and now we have one, thanks to my dear wife.
Well, you had.
Who said I could have one.
You could have one.
She said, "Would you like to have another
Corgi.
corgi?" because I was sort of going through a sort of rather depressed
Corgi withdrawal.
time. No, just life withdrawal, you know. And she said, "Do you think, dear, you would like to have another corgi?" And I said, "Oh, yes." So we now have another one
Well,
named Dylan.
Named Dylan.
A suitable Welsh
The
name.
the
Corgi
two of
for
you and your corgi, are both very lucky to have each other.
to have my wife and
But
Dylan to have.
But speaking about the bombing, you had a great line says
what?
about the bombing is that
Oh, yeah.
we knew the bombing was going to start around 7, so
Yeah,
we
that's
get dinner,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so we get dinner out of the way.
Yeah,
It's
we-
like,
we
go
were-
ahead and finish your soup, honey. The
You know,
bombing's about to
those
start.
were not the days, and particularly in England, of dishwashers.
Yeah.
Particularly, we didn't want a Bosch if there had been. You know. I don't know if your watchers would know that in World War One, that's what the troops called the Germans, Bosch.
Okay.
And of course, they make very good dishwashers, of which we just got a new one.
Yeah.
But we would do the washing up, as we call it in England, dishes and silverware, by 7 o'clock, because we figured then the sirens would go, and we'd hear this sort of which was the sound of German plane engines.
Goring had his schedule and you had yours.
That's right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a terrible
But it was
thing,
wonderful
but
until
till
we
7
had
o'clock.
a
left.
stick of bombs that just went over
Yeah.
the house. I'll
Yeah.
never forget that. So.
When did you come to this country?
1952.
52.
Yeah, I think it was a long time ago.
Were you at my christening? That's the year I was born.
No,
Probably
it was
not.
before
A
that.
little before that. A little before
He
that.
said tactfully to the host.
How we doing time-wise? We in good shape? Just yell something. Okay, we got 5 minutes. We talk about a little bit about Sinatra. Before we talk about Sinatra, we'll talk about that because we're going to break in a few. I'm not going to want to interrupt you. I'm not sure that's possible. You were very close to Sarah Vaughan.
No.
You knew Sarah Vaughan. It's 5 down, 3 to go. You wrote a marvelous tribute to Sarah Vaughan.
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Vaughan, actually, now I remember it, years ago, when I was in New York, I mean, I hadn't been over here very long, and with my friend Peter Daniels, who used to play piano for Barbra Streisand
Right.
and passed away, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, we wrote a song called I Still Believe in You. And Sarah recorded it. It's on a Mercury album. But what happened was that when she passed away, I had a melody which needed a lyric, and it da-da, you know, so the name Sarah fitted.
Okay.
So I wrote a lyric in sort of, I don't know, sort of a profile, a summation, a complimentary lyric about Sarah. And Shirley Horn did it at Carnegie Hall, and I got
For her funeral or for the
no
tribute?
after she passed
After she
away.
passed in
yeah.
1990.
And then what happened was that at the, I shall never forget this, it's a kind of a fun story, and it's typical of Carmen McRae. A lady friend of mine, we went down to Forest Lawn. We flew down and went to the Forest Lawn service for Sarah. And sitting in front of us was Carmen McRae. And she turned around and said, "Carroll," she said, "by the way, I heard you write a song. I want that song about Sarah." And I said, well, yeah, you know. And she recorded it as her album, tribute album to, what was it called, Sarah, Dedicated to You, right. And I got a nice mention in Stephen Holden in the New York Times about that.
We're speaking with Carroll Coates, songwriter, rapscallion. Is that on the card?
Rapscallion? No, I'm not into rap.
No,
No.
that's would be the
No,
new
just a
hip hop
scallion.
scallion.
Just a
Hip hop
scallion.
scallion.
Just a plain baby
lyricist,
onion.
composer, a man about town, and a
Yes,
dear
great
friend.
sophisticate.
You are watching Jazz Tonight. We'll be back to talk a little bit of Sinatra in just a few.
I'm having fun.
Hi, Michael Jacobi here, executive producer of Jazz on the Plaza, a production of Los Gatos Music and Arts. You know, people often ask me how can they help support us, and in doing so, help keep jazz alive. Well, a couple of ways. One, you could get a corporation and give us $500,000. Now, it was worth a shot. Or two, you could buy some reserved seats. You buy some of the merchandise. And this year, with our tribute to Frank Sinatra, there's some wonderful fedora logoed wine glasses along with shirts. And best of all, you could either check out the gala with the 4 freshmen or buy a jazz card. Now, the jazz card is just $100, a mere C note, and there's $700 worth of value on it. All right, you give me 1 minute and these glasses, and I'll tell you exactly what you get. All right, start the clock. Go to Willow Street. It's good for 1 free pizza and a side salad. Go to Main Street Burgers. Good for a free burger, fries, and soda. Nothing But Cakes. Good for buntinis. Go to Verge, the new restaurant at the Toll House, and get a free breakfast entree. Los Gatos Roasting Company. Free breakfast crepe and a large coffee. You can even get a horseback riding lesson at Bright Ranch in San Martin. Go to Rootstock, a sampler appetizer plate. At Skin Spirit, the new folks in town, it's good for 1 skin rejuvenating chemical peel. Jazz on the Plaza, a couple of VIP entries. Billy's Boston Chowder House, good for a free Boston Cioppino lunch. Classic Car Wash, a classic car wash. What else? Arthur Murray, 1 free dance lesson. Centonove, good for a free tiramisu. The Cats, a half a rack of ribs with a side. Chin Chin, free truffle fries. Gardino's, good for a free appetizer. And finally, Testarossa Winery, it gets you 2 passes for wine tasting and a couple of invites to an artesian wine cheese experience. $700 for just a $100 investment. Now it's your chance to help keep jazz alive and help the good folks at Los Gatos Music and Arts keep on keeping on. Come on. And we're back. Jacobi here, executive producer of Jazz on the Plaza, with my dear old friend, not necessarily in that order, Carroll Coates. And don't start with your cane. You had a scepter prior to this, but I appreciate you bringing the cane.
I don't have the British, the one.
The crown jewels are in the dashboard.
No, the crown jewels are not there.
We, as I alluded to earlier, when Mr. Sinatra passed away in '98, you and I did a tribute show, and you have, I'll digress a second. My friend Jeff Levinson from the Blue Note often describes McCoy Tyner as the last man touched by God because he played with Coltrane.
Oh.
Well, you are 0 degrees of separation from Mr. Sinatra. You spent some time with him, and you were involved twice with perhaps the most special musical events of the century. You were there during a Sinatra recording session and at Capitol. Tell me how you met Frank, and I know it's a long story, but talk a little bit
originally?
Yeah.
I was about 17 and should not have been playing the piano in a bar, but there was a private club in London called the White Room, and a lot of movie people used to come in there. And Ted Chapman, who was a scriptwriter, he was a regular customer, and I was playing the piano, and he said, "What's that you keep playing?" I said, "Oh, it's something I've written." He said, "What's it called?" I said, "It's called London by Night." He said, "Does it have any words?" I said, "Yes." "Does it? You have a copy?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I have a friend named Julie Wilson, a cabaret, wonderful cabaret singer, an American cabaret singer, who's coming over here shortly to open at the Embassy Club and do 2 or 3 weeks of shows. And I'd like to give it to her because it'd be nice for an American to sing a song about London, you know, in her act." And so he gave her the song, and she decided to include it in her act every night. And Frank Sinatra was at the London Palladium at the time. I used to go to the Embassy Club every night and sit in the corner on a little stool and listen to my own song, because that was kind of rare in those days at my age. And Sinatra came in one night for dinner after the show with his entourage, with all the suits behind him, you know.
This is 1950-ish?
1949 or 50, yeah. And she came over to me and she said, do you know who that is over sitting at the table? Well, and I said, yes, of course. And she said, well, he wants to meet you. So I, having almost wet myself when she said that, I went over and he said, kid, that's a great song that I just heard Julie sing. He said, I'd like to take that song back to America and record it. So I didn't exactly say no. And so that's what he did. And not only did he record it, but he recorded it with us on a special 78 record at the time that was sold, had a speech on it by the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen's husband, the present Queen's husband, who was then Prince Philip, in aid of the National Playing Fields Association in England, which was for underprivileged kids, And so on the record, Prince Philip made a speech to say, by buying this record, you are joining Frank Sinatra, Ivan Novello, who wrote the song on the other side, and Carroll Coates.
Oh, how wonderful.
So at my age, that was...
So
really
Frank recorded it for that, which could be arguably a V-disc, similar to it.
Yeah, so
this was
it
one
was
of those
on
times.
the last days of his Columbia thing,
So
with Axel Stordo's orchestra.
he goes to Capitol.
Yeah, that was quite a while after that.
Right, but the first time he records it after that, the second time he
Right,
records it,
right.
is it for Come Fly With Me?
Yes.
And were you at that session?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the session that one of the theme albums from obviously those marvelous Capitol years, and arguably Sinatra at the very peak of his game. I want to say 57, 56.
And I was
57.
not at the peak of my game at that time. I was this will amuse you, I was working in a 76 gas station in Beverly Hills. And Sam Weiss, who was a friend of Sinatra's, said, oh, you're doing Carroll's tune? He said, he's working in the gas station. He said, well, Sinatra said, well, tell him to come in his uniform. So I went to Capitol Records. And when I was there, Sinatra comes in with about 40 of his entourage and friends and fans, and he looks over to me and he says, come here, kid. He said, and he gets a regular chair, like a sort of musician's chair, and he puts it down by the microphone, and he says, sit down there and keep quiet. And then he does April in Paris and then my tune. And I mean, that was a wonderful thing that he did. So...
Then subsequently he records it for an album he did called Great Songs of Great
that's
Britain.
my favorite.
That's a
version,
beautiful
with
album.
Robert Farnham.
Yeah.
Although Sinatra said that
He said he was out of voice for
yeah,
that recording.
but I mean even that Sinatra out of voice was in the wonderful area.
Yeah.
So, but Robert Farnham, who recently passed away, I think, was a wonderful British arranger, or actually a Canadian arranger living in England, did a beautiful arrangement on the song.
And we were talking. My mother's from Coventry,
Right.
who
And survived the
talking about
bombing.
bombing. Yeah.
Yeah. She and
But-
I, we both survived.
You did, and I am always been amazed that out of those darkest of times came such wonderful music.
Yeah.
And
That's a nice story.
well, it's bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. I mean, even that is such a,
And they'll always be in England.
That's right, but it's such a
They'll always
such a
be in England
lovely
as long as
thought.
there's America.
Well,
As long as there's an America. Yeah.
it's such a lovely thought. Okay, so you go to that session, and then I'm assuming you're leaving the gas station relatively soon and going off on
I
your
don't know
own.
if I did, actually. I think so, but then he recorded a couple of years later, and I wasn't in the gas station, but because that was when I started to get work at Fox,
Right.
writing songs
films.
with Lionel Newman for movies. So that's another story. But Sinatra, bless him, he recorded a song of mine called No One Ever Tells
Right.
You.
On this-
And that was another interesting session because I was there with Sam, who published it, Sam Weiss, and he did 4 songs. It was a single date, when they
This
did
is
4
for a
singles
swinging
in 3
affair.
hours.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Well, actually, no, that particular date
Oh,
was just singles,
Okay.
including mine.
okay. Which
But
ultimately.
then
ended
later,
Up, okay.
Sinatra said, the kid'll make more money if I
Okay.
put it in Swinging Affair,
Right.
take out The Lady as a Tramp, and put
Wow.
that in, which
Wow.
was, again, a wonderful gesture, you know.
And I mean, we talk. It's one thing to be at a session, to be at a session with Nelson Riddle.
Right.
Had to be special.
Well, it's just his writing. was
Tell your
incredible.
story about what you were frightened because he kept trying to
Oh.
break his voice.
Yes, good point. He did, as I say, he picked 4 tunes for the date. That was customary in those days. 3 hours in a session and 4 tunes. So he did 2 tunes, and then the third one, he said to Nelson, run through the arrangement, would you? You know, like, he liked to hear what the chart was. And Nelson, they played it, you know, without him, of course. And the music stand was here, and he took the copy, and I don't think so. Let's do Carroll's tune now.
Wow.
And I thought of that poor writer who had been, for weeks he'd heard that from his publisher that Frank Sinatra was going to record his song. To this day, I don't know who that was. But anyhow, and so I thought, you know, I said to Sam, he's not going to do that with mine, I hope, because he did, I think in the end it turned out to be about 28 takes of the song. And I said to Hank Sanacola, who was there, Sinatra's manager, I said, what's the matter? And he said, he's breaking his voice because it's a blues tune. It's perfectly all right. He's perfectly happy with it.
Yeah. If
So that was, you know.
when we post this show, if we can find a version of that and play a little bit,
Right.
that'd be
I
wonderful.
have to tell you one additional thing.
Please.
In the lyric, in the studio, while Sinatra was at the microphone in the center, this was Studio A at Capitol, and the whole Nelson Riddle strings and all that there. And I decided that I wanted to make a words change in the lyric. And Sam, who was the publisher, he said, you're not going to do that now. He was right in the middle of the takes, you know. So I said, well, if I don't do it,
It'll never get done.
it'll never get done. So there was dead silence. And I walked across to the center. And, you know, Sinatra's, my mother who knew him, used to say he had a sort of a wild eye, like a racehorse.
Yeah.
You didn't know whether he was going to be, you know. And he says, yes, kid? And like that. And I said, so he said, show me where it is. He got the pencil. And he said, that's better. You're right. Thanks. And I walked back and, you know.
That's
so
the
that
famous last line.
Huh?
That's the famous last line.
Right.
Now, we still got a couple of minutes. First verse. No one ever tells you what it's like to love and
how
lose.
it feels to have bacon and breakfast. How it feels to awaken and have
breakfast with the blues.
Can't say my own lyric.
Yeah. Keep
How to
going.
go on living. How to face another day. No one ever tells you the way.
Yeah. And you wrote the last line, or he wrote the last line?
What last line? Someone
It
tells
never
you
comes
later.
easy. No, it never comes easy.
That is Mr. S.
That Sinatra did that,
Yeah,
which
he
is the
did that.
last
He put
line
that-
of the tune that he
Yeah,
added
well,
in.
it's a sort of a tag.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the last line.
Well, it's-
I wrote the
Yeah,
last
I know you wrote the line, but he added it to the end.
How dare you,
As
sir.
as Peter Allen used to tell a great story that when he wrote "Summer Me, Winter Me," he says that he went to see Sinatra backstage, and Sinatra says, "I like your song, son." He says, "I'm going to change the lyric. Is that all right with you?" And he says, "You're Frank Sinatra. You can do anything you want," which kind of summed it up.
Incidentally, that was the Bergmans that wrote
Yeah.
Summer Me, Winter.
Well, then it's you are tough on me.
Yeah, I
You
am.
are tough.
Because I like you, so I'm tough on you.
There is a song, I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
But what are you doing these days? You still writing?
I beg your
Are
pardon?
you still writing?
Not really, except that I have to share with you a kind of an odd thing. Maybe I've never talked to other writers about this, but you know, most people, I'm sure the people in the studio right now who are doing all the operating, the technical, wonderful stuff, when they hear songs in their head, you know, and they're humming songs to themselves during work or at lunch, they're humming and hearing in their head some great rock and roll or classical music or something that they like and they've heard on the radio. My problem is that almost all the time I hear melodies in my head that are nothing to do with songs that have been previously written.
Huh.
And even if I try to stop, I mean, sometimes it gets tiresome. But I've learned, and I think it was someone told me once, I think a therapist I was talking to, and I told him about this. I said, it's kind of loopy, you know, that I'm thinking of all these tunes all the time, because I couldn't possibly write them all down. And he said, well, I think if it's an important one, it'll keep coming back. And so you should pay attention to it, you know.
Well,
but I wonder if other writers have this thing where they hear, I guess they most of the time, but mine is really nearly all the time, not while we're talking, of course.
yeah. Let's.
No, that would
You're
be-
thinking ahead of what to disagree with next.
Yes, I am.
Let's hope that.
I'm waiting to pounce.
Let's hope there are more of those unforgettable and wonderful tunes.
I didn't write it Unforgettable.
Still dancing around in your head. Carroll
Who wrote,
Coates.
who wrote Unforgettable?
Oh, it's
Huh?
Michael. I don't know.
Come on, Michael.
Yeah, we've got my staff right now is looking this up. I'm going to take a
Irving-
terrible shot in the dark.
Irving Gordon.
Irving Gordon. All right.
Who wrote Crimea River? Huh?
Bobby. There wasn't
No,
Bobby
that's
Troop.
Route 66.
Route 66.
Arthur Hamilton.
All right. How
Can you
old? All right,
imagine-
fine. We'll play your game.
Can you
How
imagine-
old was Billy Strayhorn when he wrote Lush Life?
About 23 years?
16.
16.
Carroll Coates, it's a joy. I love you, buddy.
And you too.
It's good to see you.
Thank
That's Jazz Tonight. If you're keeping score, my one thing right was right at the end. Next week we wrap up the summer of Sinatra with our old buddy Spencer Day, who will be here with Full Spectrum Jazz. And as Spencer's going to do a tune. He says people keep asking me to do a big band arrangement of Sinatra, but they never say which one. So he's going to do the Boots Are Made for Walking, Nancy's version, as though Frank did it. That's Jazz Tonight. Big thank you to the folks at Los Gatos Music and Arts, to Direct Travel, and to the folks at Disney Cruises. Until next week, I'm Jacobi. I'll see you soon.
No one ever tells you what it's like to love and lose, how it feels to waken and have breakfast with the blues, how to go on living